Hello and welcome to part 2 of week 6, Signs and Symbols, Enhancing Science Instruction Through Literacy in the MCCS Era. In part 2, we're going to be talking about the zone of proximal development and scaffolding. One part of Vygotsky's social constructivist theory is the zone of proximal development, or ZPD. The ZPD characterizes mental development in terms of mental functions that are in the process of developing but are not yet completely formed. Often we simply refer to it as the ZPD, but I find it important to think about what the words really mean. So it is a zone, which refers to an area, not a single point. It is proximal, or close, and it also refers to development, which in the language of constructivists means it refers to learning. So it is literally the area that we are close to learning, or to put it another way, what we are likely ready to learn next. Scaffolding, which was not a part of Vygotsky's theory but fits nicely with it, is one way in which we can support learners within their ZPDs. We will discuss more about scaffolding shortly. So what is the zone of proximal development? This illustration gives us some guidelines for the boundaries of the ZPD. In the center, we have the things that the learner can do unaided. This is material that they have already learned. It is not in their ZPD. On the outside are things that the learner cannot do, even with help. For example, a second grade student might be able to add single-digit numbers without help. This would be in the center of the circle. The same second grade student may not be able to multiply two-digit numbers. No matter how much help you give them, they will not be able to complete the task. A too difficult task like that would not be in the ZPD either. It is beyond the ZPD. The part in the, not the lightest blue, but the second to lightest blue, so in between then what a learner can do unaided and what a learner cannot do is the zone of proximal development, or the ZPD. And these are the tasks that we can complete with guidance or support. So thinking of the larger context of social constructivism, this is what we can do in groups or what we can do with more capable others, and this is where the learning happens. So again, this ZPD, or zone of proximal development, characterizes mental development in terms of the mental functions that are in the process of developing through our interactions with others in our social environment, but these mental processes have not yet been completely formed. So what is scaffolding? Scaffolding is probably a term that many of you have heard used in relation to the zone of proximal development. Scaffolding in the context of instruction is similar to physical scaffolding, and in many ways the term itself is a metaphor that was developed based on the ideas of the zone of proximal development. However, it's important to keep in mind that scaffolding was not actually a part of Vygotsky's original theory of social constructivism and discussion of the zone of proximal development. This term was first used in 1976 in a paper by Wood, Bruner, and Ross. In scaffolding, the instructor becomes a supportive tool for the student while they are in the ZPD, working on things that they have not yet mastered but can do with help. So when I think of scaffolding, I like to think about training wheels on a bike. With training wheels, learners can focus on things like learning to pedal and steer without worrying about balance. Once they have mastered steering, pedaling, braking, etc., the training wheels can be removed so that they can now learn how to balance. The same is true of scaffolding for any kind of learning. Once students have mastered something, the support or scaffolding should be removed, and new forms of scaffolding may need to be put in place as the learner's ZPDs expand. So in terms of instructional scaffolding, we can think of this as a process where we control parts of the learning task that are beyond the learner's capabilities. This allows the learner to focus on and master the intended features of the task. The intention of scaffolding is that it allows learners to focus on and master the things that we see as the big ideas or what we really want them to get out of what they're doing, while supporting them in areas that they may still need a little bit more guidance or help with. So some examples would be curriculum materials, activity structures, clues, reminders, encouragement, helping them to decompose or decomposition of a problem, so breaking it up into parts that are more manageable, providing examples, written instructional prompts, formula sheets, group work, etc. And we may provide structure to a greater or lesser degree for our students depending on their capabilities and what the big picture or main idea is that we want them to get out of the activity. So before we wrap up this section, I just wanted to talk a little bit about one example, which is that of collaborative reading or collaboration and development of conceptual understanding through texts. So, as mentioned earlier, we can also think about how peers can help to scaffold each other in the learning process. An issue that relates well to the Montana Common Core standards is that of collaborative reading and working with texts. So group work can be helpful for working with text resources, but particular conditions make it most beneficial, especially for eliciting some of those higher order thinking or cognitive skills that the Common Core standards call for. As you will read about if you do the optional reading on this topic, collaborative groups working to develop conceptual understandings from texts are particularly beneficial if students are able to monitor and evaluate their collective understanding of the texts. So that includes asking themselves questions like, includes things like, are students questioning other students' interpretations? So others in their group, are they questioning their understanding or their reasoning about the texts? Or are students aware when someone else's thinking differs from theirs? Excuse me. So being aware of this, so others' interpretations or how others are thinking about or utilizing texts, and actively challenging ideas and conceptions of others in their groups can help to build or construct, remember we are taking a constructivist perspective on this, group members' knowledge. Finally, having metacognitive awareness of what parts of the text they aren't understanding and developing questions for further discussion can also aid in conceptual understanding. However, these are definitely some higher level thinking and learning processes, as I mentioned, which also align well with the skills that the MCCS say students should be building. But this means that students are probably going to need different types of instructional scaffolds in order to engage in these processes as part of their group work and collaboration. So again, getting back to helping them with that metacognitive piece, engaging in thinking about, do I understand this or not? What kinds of questions do I have? And how does my understanding or my interpretation relate to that of others? And these are all things that we can work on through instructional scaffolding, but also just to go back to our discussion of social cognitive theory. We talked a lot about in the webinar about the use of models and also peer models. So thinking about how we can help students to be more aware of these processes and to help them demonstrate or model these types of things for other members in their group. So this is just one idea to help us think about, well, how might we utilize some of this social constructivist perspective when we're thinking about working in student groups, utilizing texts, and also utilizing digital tools, because I know many of you had mentioned that sometimes they're in short supply and students end up working in groups with them, but this can actually be good for the learning process as well if we're supporting our students or scaffolding them in ways that help them to engage in productive collaboration. So again, this has been a brief overview of the zone of proximal development and also of scaffolding. Thank you.